Welcome to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White, the real dragon slayer, author and entrepreneur sales coach. Tune in weekly for human conversation about business and sales. Enjoy business expert interviews, educational episodes, and virtual cuppers with entrepreneur business owners. So grab yourself a cuppa and enjoy. Here is your host, Jules White.
So welcome everybody to the Human Conversation. I've got a lovely guest today who I have known for, I would say 2 to 3 years now, but it might even be longer. Jean?
Jules, it is 6 years.
Oh goodness. And that just shows you how quick time goes, listeners. I have with me the amazing Jean Fleming. Jean's a leadership coach for women. She is also a mummy. She's a cat lover. And she's also a lover of dogs. So that's good because you know how much I love dogs. And I am so happy to have her here on the Human Conversation. We are going to chat as we always do and see where the conversation takes us. But what I hope is, listeners, that we inspire you along the way. So, Jean, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you, Jules. Thank you for inviting me.
It's so nice to have you on here. Jean, how many years did you say? 6 years?
6 years, yeah. So I started my business 6 years ago. And as you well know, you were integral in me setting that up, in how I shaped my first program. And remember coming to your place in Milton Keynes and having a day designing what I wanted to do. So yeah, that was about 6 years ago.
It's amazing how fast that's gone. And we had such a great day together. This is why I love my work, because it really was productive, inspiring. I always learn as much from my clients as they may learn from me. So yeah, it's always good. From there, I know you've done a load of amazing things, which we'll talk about in this podcast. But I have to ask you my first question that I always ask, and that is, what did you want to do when you left school?
I didn't have a bloody clue. So my start, I guess, in school, I discovered boys rather than putting myself to my studies, and that distracted me. So I left school at 16 with not a lot in terms of qualifications, certainly not what I should have got. And my mum and dad, Irish immigrants, moved over in the 60s, and basically my mum's from a farming background, 16 kids, didn't have a lot of money. And my parents did really well for themselves considering their start, and she found herself 17, pregnant, newly married in the UK. And so their ambition for me perhaps was not ambitious enough, but their advice on leaving school was be a secretary. Everybody always needs secretaries. And actually, people are so self-sufficient now, and I suspect with AI people need secretaries even less than they do currently. So anyway, I decided, left school at 16, went to uni for a year to do an office diploma, and I became a legal secretary. So did that for a number of years before thinking, oh dear, I don't really want to be doing this for the rest of my life. What can I do? No offense to any secretaries listening, but what can I do else? And decided that I would go back to uni. So at this point, I was classed as a mature student at the ripe old age of 22, and I went to uni to do a HND. And my HND was going to be, I can't remember what it was called actually, was it business? But it had marketing, finance, and HR as part of the key modules. And I thought I wanted to be an accountant. So I was going for the finance part of it because I enjoyed maths at school. I'm not by any stretch of the imagination an A-star maths person, but I quite enjoyed it. Anyway, within a couple of weeks, I didn't even know what this HR stuff was all about, but within a couple of weeks, I realised I definitely didn't want to be an accountant, and I quite liked this HR stuff, which is all about people, which is obviously very connected with this conversation.
Yeah.
So I ended up following the HR stream, doing a degree, doing my master's, doing my professional HR CIPD qualification. So as a late starter throughout my 20s, it was all about studying, traveling, having fun, So I went off to Africa for 3 months on my own and shaved my head bald and did some crazy stuff like jumping off bridges, doing bungees and whitewater rafting. And yes, I did a lot of travel. My 20s were a lot of fun, living in London, studying, single, and yeah, and that was my sort of the start. And my career didn't really start until mid to late 20s when I finished the degree and got a job in for a company as an office manager, and then I moved into performance and reward for a consultancy and did that for a while. And then at the ripe old age of 30, I met my now hubby, who was from Birmingham. So yeah, so then the 30s were all about establishing myself in my career and marriage, and really moving to the Midlands. We were planning on moving to London together, but then personal circumstances in Noel's family changed that because his dad got ill and passed away. So we ended up moving to the Midlands. So I find myself in the Midlands marrying a Brummie. Who would have known?
Amazing, amazing. It's so interesting, actually, the start of your story, because I think it was probably a couple of podcasts ago, I spoke to lovely Sharon Luca. And I guess Sharon's probably around our age, actually. I think we're all a similar type of age, us three. And she left school, no idea what she wanted to do. And guess what? She became a secretary, and a legal secretary at that. And many of my friends went into the secretarial field because in
Yeah,
those days, like you say, we needed secretaries. My own mum went back to college at 40 to
brilliant.
learn shorthand and typing and get her O level in English because she'd left school, I think, at 14. So I
Right.
think what's lovely about, if you're younger and you're listening, guys, to understand how different it was when we were younger. We're around our 50s in terms of our age, how different it was and how quickly this has changed now in terms of the dynamics in business. I think that's quite a fascinating transition, isn't it, Jean?
Well, also I think because my daughter is now 15, so I left school at 16. So the thought of her leaving school next year is like, no way, she's not ready for the world. It's kind of, and fortunately they make them stay on until they're 18 now. But it just feels like, how can you make a decision for your life for the rest of your life? And Lily's going through what does she want in her career? And I just keep saying, it doesn't matter what you choose today because it can change tomorrow, because
Mm,
nobody has to stay in a career for life anymore. So you've got
yeah.
flexibility. And I have a conversation with her about, what do you really love doing? And she said, cuddling Dottie and drinking tea. A dog. I said, okay, so what job can you do where you cuddle dogs and drink tea? And she said, I could be a dog groomer. I said, well, go and be a dog groomer. But school careers advice wouldn't tell you that, would they?
No, no, no.
She probably won't be a dog groomer. But I'm just trying to show her that you can be whatever you want to be. There's no
Yeah.
expectation from us as her parents. And I work with too many women who have gone into their careers because A, we didn't know what to do, and B, their parents encouraged them in a certain direction and they've ended up staying there, whether that's professional services, law, whatever. And I just kind of think, you can change your mind at any time. You're not stuck with it. It's just
Mm.
about being brave and taking a new direction.
I love that attitude, and it's really important, I think, for us to instill that in our children. And I was exactly the same with Sam, because Sam didn't want to go to uni. He wanted to do music production. He didn't even want to really do sixth form, so he went to college instead of having to sit and do A levels, and he did
Yeah.
this music production course. And I think it just made him far happier, but equally it also helped him to realize exactly what he did and didn't want to do on the back of that. He's a creative, and creatives are also very special creatures in terms of what they want to go out into the world and do. So
Yeah, and I can see that in Lily as well, to be honest. She's creative and she doesn't want to go to uni at this stage. She's saying she doesn't want to go, and that I'm fine with that. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I'd much rather she found what gives her joy and do that, because you're doing it for enough hours of the day.
Me
Yeah,
too. And I think there's always been that pressure. Well, you have to go to uni because actually, if you haven't got a degree, you won't get a job. And there's this narrative that was
yeah.
often around, and maybe still is a bit now.
People are much more open to apprenticeships now and just other ways of doing things. So
Yeah.
yeah. And it's so expensive for youngsters to go to college now or university now. I didn't follow a normal path, and I did okay in my career, and ended up in a place that I was very happy in. So
Yeah, and I left school at 16 like you, and I went to work at NatWest Bank, and I just worked my way through the business world and found sales, and the rest is history, I guess,
yeah,
from what I ended up doing. What I wanted to perhaps come back to was the fact that you chose this HR route. So,
yeah,
you're now in this space where there are people. Obviously, you've met your husband and you've moved to the Midlands. Another
yeah.
thing we share in common, because I moved to the Midlands and was there for 15 years, although we didn't know each other then.
No, not then, no.
So you're in the Midlands, you're married. Did you think you wanted children at that point, or was this all about career for you?
I wanted children. I didn't want children until my brother and his wife had children, had a daughter, and oh my God, I loved this child, and I thought, how can I love a child that isn't mine, like the way I loved their firstborn, and their subsequent secondborn. So that sort of made me realise. So at that point, she was born when I was 30, 29, 30. So it was only then that I was starting to think I might be interested in having children. It hadn't been a focus since then. But then I didn't meet Noel till I was 30. We got married at 34. And then it ended up not being so easy for us. So Lily's my IVF baby, my free NHS baby. So we got her, and then we had some unsuccessful rounds after her. So she's a single child, but very appreciated and loved, and is a delight, really. So
Yeah, and it's a very tough journey, IVF, isn't it? And maybe people don't realise, and they underestimate what it's actually like to go through that.
well, do you know what? It was interesting because we went through it when we were living in France. So with my job, it took me to France for a year. So I was living in Paris, which was great because I didn't speak French. Still don't, by the way. But before we had gone to Paris, we had been to the doctor. Why weren't we getting pregnant? Found out it probably wasn't going to happen naturally. So put ourselves on the NHS waiting list. But I was 38 by this point. Anyway, time progresses, only like literally a couple of months, and I have a conversation with someone, like the group HR guy at work, because I was on the talent list, and he said to me, what did I want to do? And I said, well, I'd really love a stint abroad. And within 2 months I was in Paris. So that happened really quite quickly. But I think after finding out we may not have children, it was kind of like, you got to go and make the most of it and do what you want to do.
Mm.
So my hubby had a gap year, and we went out there, and within a few months of being there, got a letter from the NHS to say they'd got funding, and if we wanted to go for IVF. So we were in France thinking, do we want to do this? It's already a journey, and in terms of roller coaster for IVF, do we want to really travel from France to do that? But we thought, by this time I'm 39, it's going to be the one freebie baby I was going to have the chance to have. So we went for it, but we didn't tell anybody, didn't tell my mum and dad or any family or friends or anything. So we kept coming back to Birmingham for the treatment and anyway, long and the short is it was successful, and it was incredible because they basically said to us the quality of the embryos was not strong. We only had 2 embryos anyway. So they said, look, because it's the only 2 you've got and because of your age, we'll put them in. And now I've got my beautiful girl. And I just kind of think, how can they say she's not good quality? Look at her, she's amazing.
She is. She is amazing. I'm lucky to have met her actually just a few weeks ago. But isn't it wonderful? And it's almost that, how my dad always said there's no such word as can't, Jean. It sort of went through my head when you were telling me that story. Sometimes it is about persistence, belief, and just not giving up, isn't it? I think as well.
Yeah.
And it's a lovely story. I only have Sam because I did conceive him naturally, but then I also was pregnant a second time, so I had miscarriage, and many women have miscarriage. But actually, what I didn't realise was how traumatic that can be, because for me, there was a lot of hope around having a second baby at the time because of what else was going on in my life. So I remember that being and feeling very traumatic, And of course, Sam ended up then just being an only child, which sometimes I thought, oh, that's really unfair for him. And then other times I thought, He's just an amazing young man. So actually,
Yeah.
we're just all very lucky, you know. So it's all about perspective, isn't it? I think.
Well, it is, and I know it's interesting the miscarriage, because one of my subsequent IVF rounds was successful, and then I miscarried on that one, and second, alongside losing my dad is the worst thing. So going through IVF and having failed IVFs wasn't as traumatic as miscarriaging and losing my dad and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
that was the trauma that put an end to. We're not having any more IVFs after
that's
that.
it. Yeah, we're just going to
Yeah.
crack on. So you've got Lily.
Yeah.
What happened when you'd had Lily in terms of work? Did you have maternity leave? What was your story there,
Yeah.
Jean?
So I had been living in Paris for the year, got pregnant, and came home from the end of my year. I mean, I timed it perfectly, I have to say. Came home from the end of the year in Paris to have Lily, basically. So we came back and settled back in the Midlands again, and she was late. So, it was a couple of months. We were back here a couple of months before she came. But then a few months later, so I had a full intention of taking the year off, because I thought at that point, I was 40, so I went in to be induced the day after my 40th birthday. So I was a geriatric mother, as they call them. So I basically knew I was going to have the 12 months off. But 3 months into it, I got a call from a colleague in France saying, would I mind being nominated to be on the board? So the company was a French, a CAC 40 listed company, 13 billion pounds, 120,000 global employees, and baby brain, I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And so not really knowing what I was signing myself up for, and 3 months later find myself at an AGM presenting to myself to the audience of the AGM in English, with a translator translating me introducing myself, and then I had to get voted in. So there was 4 of us that introduced ourselves, and then I got elected in. So my maternity was going over to France for board meetings, but taking Lily with me, with my mum, and the company were great. They funded that, they paid for that. And I would have to breastfeed Lily and then go into my board meetings and come out and feed her again. And I remember coming out of one time, and I bumped into a colleague from the UK, and she said to me, "Oh my God, you're back, you've had your baby, blah, blah, blah." And my boobs just went, and my blood was completely soaking. I was just like, oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But thank God it was somebody I knew, and thank God the board meeting had finished at this time, and it wasn't before I went in. So yeah, that was but I was 40 in this board meeting, the only female, the first female to join that board. The rest were all men of, middle-aged plus, grey hair. They all spoke English, only a couple were native English speaking. So yeah, it was definitely out of my comfort zone, and a massive growth learning curve for me. So I ended up being on that board for 13 years.
Wow.
Which was a long time. Saw a lot, learned a lot about leadership and people and politics and dynamics, and yeah, it was fascinating, and learned a lot about corporate governance and things like that around how you acquire a company and the funding, and yeah, it was fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
What a great grounding and foundation as well for you to then go on and do what you now do within your own business. So
Yeah.
tell us more about sort of the transition then from being on a board to then actually having the opportunity to start your own business.
I've been in HR for a while, to the extent that there's only so many centralising, devolving, centralising restructures you can do, that you get to a bit cynical and I was getting a bit bored of it. So I wanted something different, and I ended up deciding on coaching and went and did my coach training, which is 10 years ago. So I did my coach training, but then at the same time as I was doing that, having a conversation with someone in the UK within the business, they basically said to me, why didn't I apply for a job that they had outside of HR but in the business? So I did that, got the job, and then spent the next 4 years on that account, which was incredible. And it was a shift in my career. It was moving out of what I knew, my comfort zone of HR, but I felt like I was really brave back then. I feel like post-menopause, I'm less brave than I perhaps was, 10 years ago. So I got consumed in that account for a few years, so didn't focus on my coaching. And then I got to the point where I just thought, no, it's something's still not landing. I was heading for burnout. I was stressed in this job. I was still on the board. I felt like I was being pulled in all directions. Lily was young. And then I got to the point where I just thought, I need time out to think about what do I actually want from my life. And that's when I took a year off. And I just, basically took a sabbatical and spent time thinking about it. I mean, it was unfortunate, as an understatement. It coincided, my dad unexpectedly died. So week one of my planned sabbatical was his funeral. So I think the first 6 months was pretty much focusing on mum and grief and, just coming to terms with our new reality. And then the second 6 months, I was like, right, what am I going to do to make this year off count? And I just thought, I'm going to set up my own business, which is what I did, and which is when I met you.
When we met,
And I started to define what my service offerings were going to market and stuff like that, which is where I worked with you. So that got me into my own business. At the end of my year off, I had to make a decision: do I stay off? Do I go back? But I knew I didn't earn enough to stay off, so I had to go back. But I was fortunate that they agreed to me going back part-time in a different role, in another people role, but within the business. So that was kind of combining my two previous career paths, if you like. And then at a board meeting, because I was still on the board at this point, at a board meeting, when I was over in Paris, I met a colleague for lunch who was the group HR guy. And basically he offered me a job. He said, why don't you come and work for me and do for us what you do for the women in your business? Because he could see me on LinkedIn and stuff, promoting my women in leadership stuff. So that was it. So I then worked with a colleague to set up the Women in Leadership program for that organisation, which ultimately had 500 women in it and ran different webinars. And I was their internal coach. So I did one-to-one coaching with a lot of the senior women globally. And then in my own business, I got my own private clients. I work for other corporates. I deliver women in leadership programs. A lot of the one-to-one work that I do with women is around maybe career change or looking to build their confidence up. There's a lot of women who stop themselves from doing things because they worry that, they're not the right person, or they don't have the right experience or qualifications or whatever. So, but I'm just encouraging them and empowering them to be a bit more brave and just go for it.
Yeah, it's always a common thing, isn't it? We hear it so often, these inner voices we have that tell us we're not good enough. I just went and did some work in Budapest for 4 days, which was, I was there for 6 days. I did 4 sessions across 4 days. I worked with these amazing people who were super academic. They're all on an MBA. So I'm teaching an MBA class, having left school at 16-year-old with no qualifications.
Well done.
And but the trauma it causes you internally is so interesting, isn't it? I'm not good enough to teach this class. How could I possibly be in front of these people and they'll learn anything from me? And it's like this constant. And what was so lovely, I think, about that scenario for me was I went and taught sales management from a human-centric point of view. And so the student feedback was, we've never done anything like this before. This is brilliant. We were able to start looking at the human. That's not something we do. And so it was massively rewarding. But of course, before you start, you're assuming they're going to want certain content like this, laid out like this, with all these theories and facts and backups. And ultimately, they loved what we did because it was different,
Well, and it's the same in writing my book. I just, will anybody buy it? Nobody's going to want to listen to me. Who do I think I am? All of this. And you have to keep trying to deal with that to get on and sit down and write and focus properly. So
I'm really excited that you're writing a book. So let's just touch on that for a little while, because you've brought it up in the perfect place of the conversation. Just to recap, you've gone from kind of leaving school at 16, training to be a secretary, also discovering what you really wanted to do, I think, like dropping into that people field and knowing that was your place. And then all the moving to the Midlands, the travelling, the challenging stuff you've gone through. A massive courage you have, Jean, that you probably don't even realise you have.
I feel like when I was younger, I did have courage, but I feel post-menopause, I've lost my bravery a little bit. But having said that, I'm writing a book, so that takes courage. So
Exactly.
it's not all gone, it's there, but I feel it's just more buried maybe than normal.
But to lead you up to writing a book, look at all the things you've done. Equally, you've then been the only woman, or the first woman certainly, on a board at that really senior high level for 13 years, Jean, not just a couple of board meetings, 13 years, then coaching again within that business, being recognized as a coach, that there's a need for a coach in the women leadership piece, this stuff's really fruitful. It's really lovely to sort of talk about. Now you're going to sit and write a book, and you're saying to me, well, is anyone going to want to read this book? And, what do I know? And of course, that there it is right in front of you. You listen back to this podcast, Jean, you'll see every reason why you're writing the book. So tell us, have you got a title for the book? Is it a working title? Where are you at with it?
So it's a working title, which is Unlock the Keys for Your Success. And it basically came about from all my lovely clients that I've worked with, and seeing themes come through. I mean, all of these are professional senior women in their organizations, and they're having the self-doubt points, and it's just things that they're doing or not doing that, is sort of putting obstacles in their own way. And I kind of think with the whole gender equality, yes, we can put our pointer to society or organizations and culture and stuff like that, but actually we're half the battle ourselves, I think. So it's, let's get in control of ourselves, or promote ourselves in the right way. So I work with women on things like what's their personal brand, how do they present themselves, what do they want to be known for, what do they want their legacy to be, obviously confidence to be able to do that. But just looking at a lot of different things around who we are, how we support people, how we create a culture, how we contribute to the culture within an organization. Just loads of different things. And that's the good thing. There's themes, but each scenario is slightly different. So it's interesting, and it's fascinating, because listening to these women, and I just look at them and I think, God, you're amazing, all of the stuff you've done. And then they're sitting there with the self-doubt. We're all like it. Get them action focused. So rather than just saying, oh, I'd really like to do X. Okay, so how are you going to do that? What do you need to do to get there? Or, what does that look like? And it might not be a plan for the next 6 months. It might be a 5-year plan or a 6-year plan or something. But, as long as you're progressing towards it and taking action, I think, it's brilliant. It's changes your view on how happy you are with life.
No, I agree. And I think putting it into a book is always going to be a really smart thing to do, because, our books are now our business cards in a sense, aren't they, as well? And just having these, there's been a long time before we started to be able to self-publish and be almost these hybrid type authors, where you would have to take a book to a publishing company and it wouldn't be published if they didn't think it was good enough. And I guess what I love is that you're able to now publish your journey experience, and publish yourself. And yes, of course, that means that there could be books on the market that ain't that good. However, it's subjective ultimately, isn't it?
They'll always be good for someone, I think. It's kind of, there's always going to be someone that it will help, because as long as you're a couple of years ahead or a couple of months ahead of them in your journey, or you're a little bit more knowledgeable in something and you can share that knowledge and how to overcome the challenges, I think there will be value in it. I mean, when I sit and think logically, I know there'll be value in my book, Jules, but I just need to keep my own inner critic in place. We may be coaches, we know what to do, but it doesn't mean to say we're not human.
No, we're vulnerable. And, there's an element here, I think, that's interesting to discuss is ego, because ultimately, part of this self-doubt and will people like it is connected to ego. Nothing wrong with having a bit of ego, by the way, but sometimes we need to just let that go and say, listen, the guys who like it and the guys who need it will love it. And that's the important bit, you know. You don't need everybody to say you're amazing and it's a wonderful book, you know, but it's just, I think, having the faith that anything you're sharing is going to be valuable. It really is, you know.
And you know what? I've done a document which I will circulate at some point, and I can offer it as a freebie to any of your listeners, actually. But it's about the 10 mistakes that women make, and that was the start. I did that as a sort of marketing tool, and I haven't really done much marketing with it because I suddenly thought, this is the bones of a book. You know, it's like, don't just tell them the mistakes they make. In my book, I tell them what to do about it to overcome it.
Exactly.
So, and interesting you said about the publishers and self-publishing, because I just kind of think if publishing is a man's world and a man read the book, they'd probably think, oh, this is all poppycock. You know, they wouldn't get it because it's written with a female audience in mind.
Interesting, isn't it? Interesting. But great that we have the opportunity now to be able to write and publish books, you know. I think that's a great part of your value ladder, you know, in order to offer that as well, because it's another step then into somebody getting to know you and whether they want to work with you. I will always remember you, Jean, in terms of value ladder, because I think we had a virtual cuppa, as I call them, on Zoom to get to know each other. I think the next thing you did was you bought the book. And I think the next thing you did then is we had maybe a 90-minute session. And I think the next thing we did was we had a day together. And when you think about the value ladder, you were just like this perfect client who went up the value ladder. And ultimately, this is all about building trust. This is about seeing, is this person the person that makes sense to me, that I trust and that I want to work with? So your book is now part of your value ladder, Jean.
Well, and you know what? I have gone all in with people who I haven't gone through a value ladder with, and absolutely regretted it, because I've gone and spent decent money on part of my own development and my training, and got into their programs or whatever, and thought, oh no, this is not not for me. I'm not the right audience, or you know, I felt missold or whatever. But yeah, so absolutely, it's a taster so that people can get to understand me, my style, because I'm quite direct and I don't apologize for that, but I do it with compassion and love, but I will hold people to account. And so that's kind of who I am as a coach, I guess, is that sort of.
And we need coaches like that as well, because we have to have somebody who is actually going to make a difference for us. I have a wonderful coach who I've always had right from the beginning, and I just tap into her when I need her. I use and abuse her, Helen Packham. She'll know, she might listen and she'll know that it'll be her. But what's really good about her is she just knows me. She knows me really well now, and actually she's harsh with me when I need her to be, because she knows that's why I'm there and what I need from her. Sometimes you need that accountability, don't you, to be able to then push on to the next thing.
And a coaching conversation is not supposed to be a cozy chat. It's supposed to challenge your thinking, make you think in a different way, get a different perspective. So it's supposed to be a little bit challenging, you know.
Definitely.
But
No. But I think inspiringly challenging. Let's call it that, because I like the idea of it being that way. So you've got your own business, you've got a book, you're doing your coaching. What is next, Jean?
Retirement.
Financial freedom and retirement.
No, I mean, I haven't thought beyond the book, really. I mean, I'm not a public speaker, so I don't plan on being on the speaking circuit or anything like that. But, you know, I just choosing who you can work with, who you want to work with, working with nice people. I mean, I think the shift that I've had in the 6 years since having my own business is I'm definitely all about balance. So that's another thing. I work a lot with women who have no work-life balance at all. So, you know, definitely about setting strong boundaries and things like that. But getting joy in what you do. It's like talking earlier about what my daughter does. You know, it's like, think about what you enjoy doing and pick something you enjoy, because, you know, yes, I did enjoy HR for a period of time until I started getting a bit cynical about it. But, you know, I just got to the point where I just thought, what do I really want to do? And I don't think many of us stop and reflect on what gives me joy. And I love the human connection. I love the interactions with people. I love to think that I'm helping unlock something in them, hence the book. So, it's unlocking, and it's giving them freedom to be even more of what they want to be.
So who's your ideal type of customer, type of client?
Female, obs. But most of the people I attract are professional females, because I've worked in that environment. So corporate professionals, predominantly, yeah.
And if
globally, so I work across the globe. I don't have a specific UK base. It's most of my work is virtual. So
yeah, and if somebody's listening and they're thinking, well, Jean sounds really interesting, what would their real thing be that's keeping them awake at night that you will then be able to help them with, if you could just pick one core thing?
Feeling stuck, feeling frustrated, stuck, and that could be stuck in the current job, stuck in the current company, stuck with a challenge that they don't know how to overcome, and stuck in a relationship. I coached one of my ex-clients, and it became apparent that her value set was completely different to her husband's, and she ended up divorcing him, not just because of my coaching, I'm sure, and I'm not encouraging all your women to
go get divorces.
But it's the thing about coaching is it's a space for you to think, and we don't have that in our busy world, in our busy lives. So getting you to think deeper than you would perhaps do on your own, I think.
Making the space to do that, as you rightly say. So I guess final question to the listeners, because we've just had what I think is a really interesting conversation about, the direction we tend to go in life, and how sometimes it's almost like these happy accidents, and we go in directions we didn't expect to go in. We have opportunities we never imagined we would have. And I always think to myself, actually, you make those opportunities. You may not realize that, but you do.
Yeah.
What would you say to the listeners who are listening in, is just that one thing to sort of think about on the back of this podcast about themselves?
I guess I would say, how much joy are you getting out of your life and your work life, and what tweaks do you need to make? Because it doesn't have to be anything major. It can just be commitment to yourself that you're going to leave the office at 6 o'clock every night, so that you have time to be sociable, so that you have time to do exercise or eat healthily or whatever you want. But it's what tweaks can you make to get more balance and joy in your life, really.
Yeah, it's a great one, isn't it? It's a really great one. How often do we ask ourselves that question as well? We don't, do we, really? Because we're too busy.
Well, and it's doing, work on people's values, what's important to them, and they just don't do it. We don't, generally we don't do it. We do, because we're in the coachy world, but outside of coaching, I don't know people really think about what their values are.
Yeah. And actually, that's a lot of the work, well, part of the work that we did in Budapest as well, with the class in Budapest. It was really lovely to start listening to their values. I want to also just mention something that you did, which I just thought was quite phenomenal. You did a little trip up Everest, Jean, did you not?
Yeah. So last year my hubby turned 50, and he always said he wanted to climb Everest to Everest base camp, not the whole of Everest, for his 50th. And there was various debates of, does he go on his own? Will we go as a family? Will just him and I go? So anyway, the three of us went, and we all did it, and it was amazing. And I would never have thought myself fit enough or capable of doing that, but it just shows what we're capable of if we put our focus on it. So it was brilliant. So we had a great time.
Very inspiring. I followed it on Facebook. I felt like it was definitely nothing I would ever want to do myself. But then equally, I felt excited to be on the journey with you, even though it was through Facebook. And I walked Hadrian's Wall. So listen, that's my nearest I'm ever going to get to anything like that for you, which was amazing.
Go and do Snowdon, Jules. Go and do Snowdon. That's doable.
Yeah, I've heard lots of people say that, and I think I obviously will do that one day, because I love my walking. So, Jean, it's been amazing talking to you, and I think one of the things that is just so important to me when we have these podcasts is to just understand those little things we forget about, those things that we think aren't possible, and these conversations actually show the listeners that they are. And it is actually all about approach, attitude, mindset, and belief, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's always a joy talking to you because you're so positive and optimistic and a joy anyway. So that's great.
That's lovely. Well, I'll make sure all of your links are put into the notes for the podcast. So listeners, you can contact Jean, you can connect with Jean, you can get on that waiting list for the book, which is going to be so important. And that means she has to get on and write it. You see, I'm putting all these accountability things in place for her. But please do connect with Jean. She is a really lovely, lovely character and somebody great to know, very inspiring. And if you've enjoyed the human conversation, of course, we would like you to like and save and download on whatever platform you listen to your podcasts. We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, we're on SoundCloud, and we're probably on many more because it branches right across the internet. We love having the human conversations. We hope you do too. And we hope to see you again next time on The Human Conversation. Ta-ta for now.
You've just been listening to the Human Conversation podcast with Jules White. To find out more about the other work that Jules does, please visit her website www.liveitloveitsellit.co.uk. And if you enjoyed the podcast, then please do leave a rating and review on the platform you use to enjoy her show. Thanks for listening and see you next time.